The taste of her lips lingered long after she pulled away, her eyes wide with the same shock he felt. 5 years of hostility dissolved in that single, forbidden moment. But what James didn't know as he stood there, breathless in the empty conference room, was that Victoria had just received the email that would force her to fire him within 24 hours. Have you ever wondered how quickly life can transform? How one unexpected moment can rewrite everything you thought you knew? If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more content like this. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. James Morgan adjusted his tie with one hand while balancing his phone against his ear with the other. "Sweetie, I know I promised pancakes, but Daddy has to go in early today." Ms. Reynolds scheduled another last-minute meeting. His 7-year-old daughter Emma's disappointment traveled clearly through the phone. "But you promised, Daddy. You always have to work when Ms. Reynolds says so." The truth in his daughter's words stung. For 2 years since taking the marketing director position at Horizon Publishing, James had been at the mercy of Victoria Reynolds' unpredictable demands. The job paid well enough to support Emma after her mother had walked out on them, but Victoria's micromanagement was slowly crushing his spirit. "I'll make it up to you tonight, princess. Double chocolate chip pancakes for dinner?" Emma's reluctant agreement was followed by Mrs. Winters, their elderly neighbor who watched Emma before school, taking the phone to assure him everything would be fine. James ended the call feeling the familiar weight of guilt pressing down on his shoulders. The Horizon Publishing building loomed ahead, all glass and steel, reflecting the early morning sunlight. James took a deep breath before pushing through the revolving doors. Another day of Victoria's impossible standards, cutting remarks, and last-minute demands awaited him. The marketing department was still empty when he arrived, just as Victoria had intended. These early meetings were her specialty, catching him off guard, alone, without the buffer of colleagues. "You're 3 minutes late, Morgan." Victoria's voice cut through the silence as he approached the conference room. She stood by the window, silhouetted against the rising sun, her tailored suit as impeccable as always. "The meeting wasn't on the calendar until midnight, Victoria. I came as soon as I saw the notification." She turned, one perfectly shaped eyebrow raised at his use of her first name. At 35, Victoria Reynolds was the youngest executive in the company's history. Brilliant, driven, and utterly merciless, she had a reputation for breaking employees who couldn't keep up. "The Baxter campaign is falling behind. I need new concepts by end of day." She slid a folder across the conference table. James flipped it open, scanning the contents. "This is completely different from what we discussed last week. The team has already put in 60 hours on the original direction. The client changed their mind. That's business." Her cool gaze challenged him to object further. "My team is burned out, Victoria. We've been working weekends for a month straight. I had to cancel breakfast with my daughter again this morning." Something flickered across Victoria's face, so quickly James almost missed it. Was it annoyance? Or something else? "Your personal life isn't my concern, Morgan. Results are." She gathered her things, preparing to leave. End of day. No excuses. James felt something snap inside him. 2 years of swallowed responses and diplomatic nods crumbled away. "Do you ever think about the people behind the work? The lives you're affecting with these impossible demands?" His voice was quiet but intense. "Or are we all just machines to you?" Victoria froze, her back to him. For a moment, the only sound was the gentle hum of the building's air conditioning. "Be careful, Morgan." Her voice had dropped dangerously low. "You're already on thin ice after the Preston presentation." "The Preston presentation was perfect until you changed the requirements an hour before the meeting." She spun around, closing the distance between them with 3 quick steps. "Perfect?" "It was basic, safe, uninspired, just like everything else you've brought me lately." They were standing too close now, the air between them charged with 2 years of tension. James could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle that had no right to be so distracting. Maybe if you trusted your team instead of constantly undermining us, you'd see what we're capable of. Victoria's eyes flashed. Trust has to be earned, Morgan. How? You've never given me a chance. From day one, you've been determined to find fault with everything I do. Something changed in Victoria's expression then, a crack in her perfect composure. For a split second, James glimpsed vulnerability beneath the steel. And then, without warning, Victoria grabbed his tie and pulled him toward her, pressing her lips against his. The world stopped. James stood frozen in shock as Victoria kissed him, his mind unable to process the sudden shift from confrontation to this. Her lips were soft, insistent, completely at odds with the hard-edged boss he'd known for 2 years. Just as suddenly, she pulled away, her eyes wide with what looked like horror at her own actions. "This never happened," she whispered, then grabbed her portfolio and practically ran from the conference room, leaving James standing there, completely stunned. What he couldn't know was that on her phone, still face down on the conference table, an email had just arrived from the CEO, restructuring confirmed. Marketing department to be reduced by 30%. Provide list of terminations by tomorrow. Morgan should be first on the list. The day passed in a blur for James. The marketing team scrambled to rework the Baxter campaign while he moved through meetings in a daze, the memory of Victoria's lips on his replaying in his mind. She had avoided him completely after the morning's incident, communicating only through terse emails and her assistant. By 6 o'clock, most of the team had gone home, but James remained at his desk, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. The new concepts were finished, some of their best work, actually, born from the desperate energy of the day, but he couldn't focus on them. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Winters, "Emma waiting for pancake dinner. Everything okay?" James rubbed his eyes. He'd lost track of time. Again. He quickly packed up his things, sent the Baxter files to Victoria's email, and headed for the elevator. As the doors slid open on the executive floor, James found himself face to face with Victoria. She looked as startled as he felt, her composure slipping for the second time that day. "Morgan." She nodded stiffly, stepping into the elevator beside him. The doors closed, trapping them in the small space together. 20 floors of uncomfortable silence stretched ahead. James stared straight ahead. "The Baxter concepts are in your inbox." "Fine." Another floor passed in silence. About this morning, they both began simultaneously, then stopped. Victoria cleared her throat. "It was inappropriate. It won't happen again." James turned to look at her. In the harsh elevator lighting, he noticed for the first time the dark circles under her eyes, carefully concealed with makeup but visible now as fatigue wore down her defenses. "Why did you do it?" he asked quietly. The elevator stopped at the lobby, doors opening to reveal the evening security guard. Victoria stepped out quickly, and after a moment's hesitation, James followed. "Victoria, wait." She kept walking toward the parking garage, her heels clicking rapidly on the marble floor. "Victoria." He caught up to her by the garage entrance, gently catching her arm. "Talk to me. What was that about?" She pulled away, but didn't continue walking. "It was a mistake. A moment of weakness. Forget it happened." "I don't think I can." James studied her face, seeing the conflict there. "For 2 years, you've made my life hell. And then suddenly." Victoria looked away. "I received some news this morning. It affected my judgment." "What news?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Go home to your daughter, Morgan. Isn't it pancake night or something?" The fact that she remembered that detail from their argument surprised him. "How did you?" "I listen more than you think." A ghost of a smile touched her lips before disappearing. "Good night, James." She turned and walked away, leaving him with more questions than answers. If you're invested in James and Victoria's story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe now. The journey these two are about to embark on will take them places neither of them expected. The pancake dinner with Emma was a subdued affair. James tried to focus on his daughter's stories about school, but his mind kept drifting back to Victoria and that kiss. "Daddy, you're burning it." Emma's voice snapped him back to reality as smoke rose from the pancake in the pan. "Sorry, sweetie." He quickly flipped the ruined pancake onto his own plate. "This one's mine." Emma giggled. "You're being silly tonight." James smiled, reaching across to tousle her blonde curls, so like her mother's. "Just thinking about work stuff." "Is Ms. Reynolds being mean again?" Emma asked, her 7-year-old perception uncomfortably accurate. James hesitated. "Ms. Reynolds is complicated. Mrs. Winters says complicated is grown-up code for difficult." He laughed despite himself. "Mrs. Winters is a wise woman." After tucking Emma into bed with 2 stories instead of the usual one, his attempt at pancake breakfast atonement, James sat alone in his small living room, nursing a glass of whiskey. His phone sat on the coffee table, Victoria's work email address on the screen as he debated sending a message. What would he even say? "Thanks for the kiss, but why do you hate me the rest of the time?" Or maybe, "Want to explain what happened before we have to face each other tomorrow?" In the end, he set the phone aside without sending anything. Tomorrow would come soon enough. But tomorrow brought something he never expected. James arrived at work to find the marketing department buzzing with tension. His assistant, Mia, intercepted him before he could reach his office. "HR called. They want to see you at 9. Her expression was grave. "James, there are rumors about layoffs." His stomach dropped. "Layoffs? Since when?" "Apparently the decision came down yesterday. Victoria's been in meetings with the executive team all morning." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. The news Victoria had mentioned receiving, this must have been it. But why kiss him if she knew he might be on the chopping block? At 9 o'clock sharp, James sat across from Diane from HR, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I'm sorry, James. The company is restructuring, and your position has been eliminated." The words washed over him like cold water. "I see. You'll receive 8 weeks of severance, and will provide outplacement services." Diane slid a folder across the desk. "Victoria Reynolds signed off on the terminations yesterday afternoon." So that was it. Victoria had known when she kissed him that she was about to fire him. What kind of cruel game was she playing? James walked out of HR in a daze, the termination papers clutched in his hand. As he passed the executive floor on his way to clean out his desk, he saw Victoria through the glass walls of the conference room, standing at the head of the table, addressing the remaining marketing team members, his team, until about 15 minutes ago. Their eyes met through the glass. For a moment, something like regret crossed her face before she looked away, continuing her presentation. James spent the next hour packing his personal items under Mia's sympathetic gaze. "It's not right," she kept saying. "You've done so much for this department." "It's business," he replied, echoing Victoria's words from the day before. The irony wasn't lost on him. As he was about to leave, carrying a cardboard box of his belongings, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Coffee shop across the street. 20 minutes. Please." He knew without being told who it was from. James debated ignoring the message. What could Victoria possibly say that would matter now? But curiosity, and something else he wasn't ready to name, led him to the small coffee shop 20 minutes later. Victoria sat in a corner booth, away from the windows, a cup of untouched coffee in front of her. She'd removed her suit jacket, and without it, she looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. He set his box of office belongings on the floor and slid into the booth across from her. Come to gloat? She flinched at his tone. I deserve that. You knew yesterday when you... He couldn't bring himself to say it. You knew I was getting fired. Victoria nodded slowly. I found out right before our meeting. The CEO had already made the decision. I was just supposed to execute it. And the kiss? What was that? Some kind of twisted goodbye gift? Her eyes flashed with a hint of the Victoria he knew. It wasn't planned. You were standing there, challenging me, seeing through me like you always do, and I just... She shook her head. It was unprofessional and inappropriate. That doesn't explain anything. Victoria stared into her coffee cup. For 2 years, I've been harder on you than anyone else in the department. Do you know why? James leaned back, crossing his arms. Enlighten me. Because you're talented, James. More talented than you realize. More talented than I was at your age. She looked up, meeting his eyes. And it terrified me. Of all the things he'd expected her to say, this wasn't it. What? When you were hired, everyone said you were the rising star, the one to watch. There were whispers that you were being groomed to take my position eventually. Her fingers tightened around her cup. I've worked my entire life to get where I am. I sacrificed everything, relationships, family, any semblance of a personal life. And then you walked in, naturally gifted, making it look easy, all while being a devoted single father. James stared at her, trying to reconcile this vulnerable woman with the ice queen he'd known for 2 years. So you decided to make my life hell? I decided to push you. To see if you would break or rise to the challenge. A sad smile touched her lips. You never broke. No matter what I threw at you, you kept coming back stronger. Until you fired me. Victoria shook her head. I fought for you. All night, I argued with the executive team to keep your position. That's why I wasn't in the office this morning. I was making one last appeal to the CEO. James didn't know what to believe. Why would you do that? Because I was wrong about you. And about myself. She reached across the table, her fingers stopping just short of touching his. Yesterday, when you stood up to me, when you called me out on how I treat people, no one does that. Everyone's too afraid of me. I had nothing to lose, James said, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. You had everything to lose. And you did it anyway. Victoria took a deep breath. That's when I realized I didn't hate you, James. I think I've been falling in love with you, and fighting it every step of the way. The coffee shop seemed to fall silent around them, though logically James knew the ambient noise continued. He could only hear the blood rushing in his ears. You have a funny way of showing it, he finally managed. A genuine laugh escaped her, perhaps the first he'd ever heard from her. I know. I'm not good at this. Any of this. So what now? I'm still fired. Victoria straightened her shoulders, some of her usual confidence returning. Actually, that's the other thing I wanted to tell you. I quit this morning. You what? I resigned. Effective immediately. She looked both terrified and exhilarated. I've been working on a business plan for months, my own publishing company, focusing on children's educational content. I've been too afraid to make the leap. Until now, James said, beginning to understand. Until you showed me that sometimes the scariest decisions are the right ones. Victoria took another deep breath. I want you to join me, James. As a partner, not an employee. Your creative vision combined with my business experience, we could build something amazing. James sat back, stunned by the sudden turn of events. This is a lot to process. I know. And I'm not asking for an answer right now. Victoria finally reached across the table, her fingers lightly touching the back of his hand. Take some time. Think about it. Think about what it could mean for you and Emma. The mention of his daughter brought reality crashing back. I'm a single dad with a mortgage, Victoria. I can't just leap into a startup with no guarantee of success. The severance package will give you some runway. And I have investors lined up who are ready to fund us. Her eyes held a certainty he'd only seen before when she was tearing apart marketing campaigns. I believe in this, James. I believe in us. The word us hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities neither of them had acknowledged until yesterday's impulsive kiss. And what about the other thing? James asked carefully.